In the dim light of dawn, Maria sat hunched on the cold concrete floor, her small body trembling from the chill that seeped through the thin, tattered blanket wrapped around her. Her stomach growled fiercely, a relentless reminder of the empty bowl she had last seen hours ago. Her tiny hands clutched her knees tightly, trembling not just from hunger but from the cold, from the ache deep inside her that no food could soothe. Tears welled up in her big, dark eyes, blurring her view of the cracked wall before her, and she felt a crushing weight of loneliness settle over her like a heavy blanket. No one was coming. No one ever did. Across the alley, footsteps echoed loudly, harsh and deliberate. It was her stepmother, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "Stop crying, you useless thing," she sneered, her face twisted with contempt. "You're nothing but a burden." She kicked at the pile of rags that Maria called her bed, causing the girl to flinch and curl into a smaller ball. The woman's words cut sharper than any blade, stabbing into Maria's fragile heart. Her small chest heaved with silent sobs, her innocence battered by years of neglect and cruelty. The stepmother's heels clicked dismissively as she moved away, slamming the door behind her, leaving Maria alone once more. The alley grew colder, darker, the silence punctuated only by distant sirens and the faint echo of her own ragged breathing. Maria's hands clutched her stomach, now aching fiercely, a dull, persistent pain that matched the ache in her soul. She pressed her cheek to the cold stone, wishing she could disappear, wishing the world would just forget she existed. The hunger gnawed at her insides, a relentless beast that refused to be silenced. Her stomach rumbled again, louder this time, as if mocking her helplessness. Night fell heavy and thick, wrapping her in a shroud of despair. The sky turned a dull gray, and the stars seemed to hide away, ashamed of the cruelty inflicted on this tiny girl. Her eyelids fluttered closed for a moment, but the cold seeped through her thin clothes, waking her again. She shivered uncontrollably, her teeth chattering softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. She looked around desperately, searching for warmth, for kindness, for some sign of mercy. But the alley was silent, empty, unforgiving. No one came. No one heard her silent screams. Her trembling hands reached out blindly, clutching at the rough fabric of her dress, feeling the tears mingling with the dirt on her face. Her voice was barely a whisper, a broken prayer swallowed by the night. "Please," she begged no one in particular, her voice cracking with exhaustion and hopelessness. The cruel world had spun its relentless web around her, trapping her in a cage of neglect and pain. She felt abandoned, lost in a sea of shadows, her small body curled tightly into itself as the darkness claimed her. In that moment, Maria felt the unbearable weight of her loneliness pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. Her eyes fluttered shut, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to drift into a fragile sleep, hoping, perhaps, that when she woke, everything might change. But deep inside, she knew the truth. No matter how desperately she wished for kindness, for warmth, for a glimmer of hope, the cruel night was all that awaited her, and she was utterly alone in its cold embrace. The next morning, the sky was a dull, oppressive gray, casting a cold pall over the alley where Maria still lay curled on the ground. Her trembling body was barely conscious of the world around her, her mind lost in a fog of exhaustion and despair. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over her, tall and commanding. It was Mrs. Harper, the woman who owned the crumbling tenement building. Her eyes were sharp, cold as ice, and her face was hardened by years of bitterness. She looked down at Maria with a sneer, her voice slicing through the silence like a whip. "Still alive, huh? Pathetic little thing," she spat, kicking at Maria's side with brutal force. "You're scum. No one cares about you, do they?" Maria whimpered, clutching her side, her eyes wide with fear and pain. Her voice was trembling, barely a whisper. "Please. I'm hungry." Mrs. Harper laughed coldly, a harsh, echoing sound that seemed to bounce cruelly off the cracked walls. "Hungry? That's your problem. You're nothing but a useless orphan. No one's going to feed you, little rat." She stepped closer, her heels clicking ominously on the uneven cobblestones. "You're lucky I don't throw you out on the street. Maybe then you'd learn your place." Her words stung worse than any blow, they dripped with contempt, each syllable a dagger into Maria's fragile spirit. Maria's eyes welled with tears, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, I just want some food." Mrs. Harper's cruel smile widened. "Food? You think I care about that? You're just a burden. Nobody wants a starving girl like you. Maybe if you disappeared, the world would be better." She reached down, grabbing Maria's arm roughly, yanking her upright with surprising strength. Maria's legs buckled, her trembling hands clutching her stomach as pain shot through her. The crowd that had gathered nearby, some neighbors, others strangers passing by, stood silent, eyes averted, unwilling or unable to intervene. The air thickened with helplessness. Mrs. Harper sneered at the crowd, her voice rising in a mocking tone. "What are you all just standing there for? Do something, or are you all as useless as that girl?" No one moved. No one dared to stop her. The cruelty deepened as Mrs. Harper pushed Maria against the rough brick wall, her face inches from the girl's trembling one. "You're nothing," she hissed, voice dripping with venom. "You'll never be anything. You're just a parasite, feeding on the kindness of strangers until it runs out." Maria's lips trembled, her voice barely audible. "Please. I'm cold. I'm hungry." Her plea was drowned out by Mrs. Harper's harsh laughter. "Cold? You don't know what cold is. You're lucky I even let you live here. If I had my way, I'd throw you out right now, let the streets teach you what real suffering is." She shoved Maria hard, causing the girl to stumble back, her hands clutching her side. The crowd's silence was deafening, the cruel scene playing out as if frozen in time. The weight of injustice pressed down on Maria's tiny frame, the pain of rejection and humiliation stabbing deeper than any physical wound. Her eyes flickered with hopelessness, her voice a fragile whisper. "Please, don't hurt me." Mrs. Harper's eyes glinted with cruelty as she turned away, her voice echoing over the alley. "Hurt you? I'm just teaching you your place. You're lucky I don't throw you out right now," screaming and crying. "Maybe then you'd understand how little you matter." The alley grew darker, the shadows lengthening as Mrs. Harper disappeared from sight, leaving Maria trembling against the wall, her tears falling freely now, mixing with the dirt and tears of countless nights of suffering. She felt the weight of her helplessness crush her even more, her small body trembling under the weight of injustice. Alone, abandoned, she whimpered softly into the silence, her hope fading with each cruel word. The world had turned cold and silent, and she was left to drown in her pain, a tiny, helpless girl swallowed by darkness. A man walking past the alley paused unexpectedly, his eyes catching the scene in front of him. He was a stranger, dressed in a simple but neat coat, his face lined with quiet concern. He slowed his steps, instinctively drawn to the suffering he saw, something about the small figure pressed against the wall. His gaze lingered on the trembling girl, her tiny frame curled tight as if trying to hide from the world. Tears streaked her dirt-smudged face, catching the weak light of the morning. Her body trembled uncontrollably, each shiver a silent cry for warmth and comfort that she wouldn't receive. His eyes then shifted to the tall woman, Mrs. Harper, who towered over the girl with a cruel sneer. The man's stomach clenched at the harshness of her words, her voice sharp and merciless. She was kicking at the girl's side, her heels clicking with deliberate cruelty, her words dripping with disdain. "Useless. Nothing but a burden," she spat, pushing her face close to the girl's trembling one. The man's breath caught, a surge of disbelief washing over him. "Is this really happening?" he whispered softly to himself, his voice barely audible. His fists clenched involuntarily as he watched her shove Maria back against the rough brick wall, her tiny hands clutching her stomach, eyes wide with helpless fear. Around them, a few passers-by hurried past, their faces blank, eyes averted. No one seemed to notice or care. The man's gaze darted from the suffering girl to the indifferent crowd, feeling a flicker of anger simmering inside him. Why would someone treat a child like that? His heart ached with a strange mix of frustration and helplessness. He wanted to step forward, to say something, to do something, to stop the cruelty. But his feet remained rooted, caught between instinct and hesitation. The scene unfolded cruelly. Mrs. Harper spat more words, mocking, dismissive, as if the girl's pain were nothing but an inconvenience. "No one cares about you," she sneered, pushing Maria again, causing her to stumble and collapse onto her knees. The girl's trembling hands reached out, her weak voice pleading, "Please. I'm cold. I'm hungry." Her voice cracked, raw and broken, like a fragile thing about to shatter. The man's chest tightened at the sound, a deep ache growing in his throat. He looked around again, at the silent faces, at the cruel figure towering over the girl. No one was moving. No one was intervening. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. The woman's cruel laughter echoed in his ears as she continued her assault, her voice sharp and mocking. "You're nothing. Nobody wants you. You're just a useless little girl." He watched her shove Maria harder this time, her small body bouncing against the wall. His fists clenched tighter. The injustice was overwhelming. His mind raced with questions. How could anyone be so cruel? Why did no one step in? His eyes flicked back to Maria, her trembling form, her tear-streaked face, her fragile hope slipping away. The scene felt frozen in time. The girl's small, trembling frame, the cruel woman's scorn, the indifferent passers-by, each detail burned into his mind. A cold wave of sadness and helplessness washed over him. He wanted to call out, to intervene, to demand justice. But his voice was caught in his throat. His heart hammered painfully as he watched the torment unfold. For a moment longer, he hesitated, feeling the weight of his inaction pressing down on him. The cruelty continued, unchallenged. The girl's suffering stretched out endlessly before him. Her quiet, broken plea still echoed in his mind, "Please, don't hurt me." The scene held him in its grip, his pulse pounding louder with each passing second. Somewhere deep inside, a faint whisper of hope stirred, but it was fragile, barely a flicker behind the walls of his hesitation. The cruelty persisted, and the girl's pain remained raw and exposed, waiting for someone to notice, for someone to act. But for now, he watched in silence, an outsider caught in a moment that teetered dangerously between despair and the faint possibility of change. A sudden, commanding voice shattered the tense silence. "Enough." It was a woman's voice, loud and unwavering, echoing through the alley like a thunderclap. The man who had been watching stepped forward, his face fierce, eyes blazing with righteous anger. Without hesitation, he threw himself between Maria and Mrs. Harper, planting himself firmly in her path. "Leave her alone," he demanded, voice trembling with emotion but unwavering in its authority. His eyes locked onto the woman, glaring with a mixture of defiance and outrage. "You have no right to treat her like that." Mrs. Harper spun around, her face twisting into a sneer. "Who do you think you are? Stay out of this." Her voice was sharp, dismissive, as if the man's presence was an insult. She took a step closer, fists clenched, fury bubbling beneath her cold exterior. "Get out of my way, or I'll make you regret it." The crowd around them hesitated, stunned by the sudden confrontation. A few whispered, eyes wide, some unsure whether to stay or run. But the man stood his ground, his voice rising with a fierce determination. "No one has the right to hurt a child. Not you. Not anyone." His words cut through the air like a blade. Maria's trembling hands reached out instinctively, clutching his sleeve as if seeking protection she'd never known. Her wide eyes flicked between him and Mrs. Harper, fear still etched deep into her face. She was surprised, even fearful, used to the cruelty, yet suddenly feeling a flicker of hope, a fragile thread of someone standing up for her. Mrs. Harper's face darkened. She spat back, "Who do you think you are, hero? You think you can stop me?" Her voice dripped with mockery, but her eyes flickered with a dangerous spark. I'll teach you a lesson about who's in charge here. She lunged forward, her hand raised as if to strike. But the man stepped back, his voice ringing louder. That's enough. Leave her alone now. His gaze burned with conviction. For a moment, she hesitated, furious and defiant, her jaw clenched tight. The crowd watched in silent tension, some holding their breath, others rooted in shock. The girl clung to him, trembling harder, her body still shivering with cold and fear. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, don't hurt me. The woman's eyes flashed with anger, her face twisting into a cruel sneer. You think you can change anything? This little brat deserves what she gets. She sidestepped, trying to brush past the man, but he stood firm, blocking her path. No, he said firmly. Not anymore. You're done here. Leave her alone, or I'll call the authorities. The words hung heavy in the air, a challenge and a warning all at once. Mrs. Harper's face darkened further, her lips curling into a snarl. You don't scare me, she snapped. Get out of my way, or I'll make you regret it. The man's jaw clenched, but his stance didn't waver. This ends now. I won't let you hurt her anymore. His voice was steady, but his heart pounded fiercely in his chest. The crowd's whispers grew louder, some nodding in silent agreement, others watching in stunned silence. The girl's trembling slowed slightly, her wide eyes still filled with fear and confusion. She had never seen someone defend her before. The moment stretched, tense and fragile, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The confrontation had just begun. The battle for justice, for dignity, was now ignited. And Maria, trembling in the shadow of her tormentor, felt a flicker of something she had never known, hope. But the fight was far from over. The cruel woman's glare burned with fury, refusing to back down. The man's resolve only hardened. The alley grew quieter again, waiting, on edge, anticipating what would come next. The man's brow furrowed, voice sharp and demanding. Why are you really doing this? What's your connection to her? Tell me the truth. His eyes bore into Mrs. Harper, searching for any flicker of honesty. Her face flickered with a flash of panic, but she quickly masked it with a sneer. There's nothing to tell, she snapped, voice trembling. I do what I want. You don't know the full story. The crowd hushed, hanging on her words, sensing the tension thickening. Maria clutched the man's sleeve tighter, trembling but curious, eyes darting nervously between the woman and the stranger who challenged her. Suddenly, a small voice, fragile and trembling, broke through the silence. It was Maria, whispering, almost inaudibly, she's not who she says she is. Mrs. Harper's eyes widened, her composure slipping. What did you say? The man demanded, voice rough with suspicion. Maria hesitated, her lips trembling. She's not my stepmother, she whispered again, voice cracking. She's my aunt. I never knew. I thought she was just cruel. But she's been hiding something. A heavy silence fell. The crowd stared, holding their breath. The woman's face paled, then flushed with fury. Lies, she spat. All lies. You're trying to turn everyone against me. The man's eyes narrowed, voice colder. Why did you treat her like this? Why keep her here, alone, cold, hungry? What are you hiding? Mrs. Harper's hands trembled visibly now. She looked around, searching for an escape, her voice rising in false innocence. It's none of your business. She's just a troubled girl. I do what's necessary. The words sounded hollow, unconvincing. Maria looked down, tears threatening to fall. But then she whispered again, voice trembling more fiercely. She said she's my aunt. She's been lying. All this time, I thought she was my stepmother, but maybe she's not. The crowd's breath caught. The air grew heavier, thick with suspicion and shock. The woman's face twisted, anger bubbling to the surface. "That's a lie," she hissed. "You don't know what you're saying. I've done everything for her. She's just ungrateful." The man stepped closer, voice demanding. "What are you hiding, Mrs. Harper? Why do you keep her here, away from everyone? Why all the secrecy?" Her eyes darted nervously, her voice cracking. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." Maria's trembling voice broke through again, almost a whisper. "Please. I just want to know the truth. Why are you so cruel?" Mrs. Harper's face contorted, her voice rising in a mixture of anger and panic. "You don't know anything. Stay out of this." The crowd grew silent again, sensing the storm of secrets about to explode. The woman's facade was crumbling, and her lies began to unravel, piece by piece. The truth, buried deep beneath years of cruelty, was threatening to surface. The boy's questions, Maria's fragile voice, the collective gaze, all pointed toward a revelation that could change everything. The moment hung suspended in the heavy air, every second stretching longer, thick with anticipation. The secret was near the surface, trembling, waiting to be unleashed. Maria's voice trembled as tears welled in her eyes, but she forced the words out anyway. I'm your daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. The crowd gasped, some stepping back instinctively, others frozen in disbelief. Mrs. Harper's face twisted in shock, then fury, her eyes darting wildly as if trying to deny what she'd just heard. "That's a lie," she shouted, voice cracking. "You're lying. You're trying to ruin me." Her voice grew louder, more frantic. "She's nothing to me. Just a burden, a mistake I wanted to forget." Maria's trembling lips quivered as she looked at the woman she believed was her aunt. "You kept me hidden," she whispered, voice breaking. "I thought you were just cruel because you didn't love me. But I found out. I found out I was your daughter. I was born into this nightmare, and you've been hiding it." Her tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. The crowd stared in stunned silence, absorbing the shocking truth. The man's eyes widened, his jaw slack, his heart pounding wildly. "You're saying, she's your daughter? You lied all this time?" His voice was hoarse, overwhelmed with disbelief. "Why? Why keep her hidden? Why pretend she doesn't exist?" Mrs. Harper's face contorted in a mix of rage and panic. "It's not true," she yelled, voice trembling. "She's lying. She's trying to destroy me. I never wanted her. I was too young, too scared," her voice cracked into a desperate cry. "I did everything I could to keep her away. She's nothing to me." But her words sounded hollow, her trembling hands betraying her guilt. Maria's voice cracked again, quieter but filled with pain. "You told me I was abandoned, that I had no family. That I was unwanted. But I'm your daughter. I've been living in your shadow all my life." Her trembling hands reached for her chest, clutching the small, worn necklace she'd found earlier, the one she'd thought was just a keepsake. "I found this, and I realized. I'm related to you. We're connected by blood." Her voice faltered, tears streaming freely now. "I've been suffering because I thought I was alone. Because you made me believe I was nothing. But I am your child. And you've been hiding it all along." Mrs. Harper's face twisted into a mask of fury, her voice rising into shrieks. "Stop it. Stop spreading lies. You don't know what you're saying. I was forced to hide her. I was threatened, by someone. I had no choice. I was protecting myself, protecting my reputation." She took a step forward, her eyes wild. "You don't understand what I've been through. I've suffered too, more than you'll ever know." Maria recoiled, trembling, her voice barely a whisper. "Then why did you treat me like trash? Why did you hurt me? Why did you lie? The crowd remained silent, absorbing the revelation that had shattered everything they believed. The air grew thick with unspoken truths, guilt, and heartbreak. The woman's mask was crumbling, revealing a face marred by secrets and shame. Every breath was heavy, every heartbeat loud in the suffocating silence. Maria's hope flickered, hope that she might finally find her family, her truth, but also fear of what this revelation meant for her future. The scene stood frozen, the weight of the truth hanging in the air, impossible to ignore. The crowd stared, breathless, as the truth finally burst free, shocking, heartbreaking, and undeniable. Mrs. Harper's eyes widened with fury, her face turning red as rage overtook her. Lies, she screeched, voice trembling with hysteria. All of it. You're trying to destroy me, just like everyone else. She took a frantic step forward, fists clenched, voice rising to a deafening pitch. You think you can accuse me of murder? Of hiding my own child? You're crazy. I never. She was cut off by the man, who stepped even closer, voice unwavering. Enough, he barked, his fists clenched. No more lies. No more hiding. The truth is out, and you can't deny it anymore. His words cut through the chaos like a blade, echoing in the stunned silence. Mrs. Harper's face twisted into a mask of desperation. You don't understand, she shouted, voice cracking. You don't know what I've been through. I was threatened, blackmailed, by someone who would destroy me if I told the truth. Her trembling hands pointed wildly. I had no choice. I did what I had to do, what I thought was best. She was interrupted by Maria, who, trembling but resolute, stepped forward. It's the truth, she whispered, voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. You lied to me my whole life. I'm your daughter. And you hurt me because you were afraid. Because you couldn't face the truth. Her voice cracked with emotion, but her words carried the weight of everything she'd hidden inside. The crowd gasped again, some crying, others clutching their chests in shock. The atmosphere was electric, thick with the tension of shattered illusions. Mrs. Harper's eyes darted wildly, her face contorting with rage and fear. You're trying to ruin me, she spat, voice low but filled with venom. You think I'm a monster. You have no idea what I've sacrificed. You're just a child, an ungrateful brat. Stop it, the man demanded, voice booming. You're done lying. The truth is out. We see you now, the cruelty, the lies, the hiding. You can't deny it anymore. Mrs. Harper's face twisted into a mask of fury. Her voice turned shrill as she lashed out. I'll destroy you all. I'll make sure no one believes this madness. She lunged forward, reaching as if to strike, but the man caught her arm, holding her back with force. No more, he growled. This is over. Justice will be served. The crowd gasped again, some backing away, others frozen in shock. Maria clung to the man's arm, tears falling freely now, a strange mix of relief and despair. I finally know the truth, she whispered, voice trembling with a strange strength. I'm not alone. I'm not forgotten. Her words echoed in the tense air, a fragile but powerful declaration. Mrs. Harper's eyes blazed with madness. You don't know what you're saying, she hissed, voice trembling with rage. This isn't over. I'll fight you. I'll fight everyone. You'll see. The woman's voice broke into a scream, her body trembling as she tried to escape, but the man held her firmly. It's too late, he said calmly, but forcefully. The truth is out. No more lies. No more hiding. Every face around them was frozen in a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. The tension reached a boiling point, the air thick with unspoken fury. The storm of secrets, lies, and pain had finally exploded. The confrontation had hit its peak. And everyone knew, nothing would be the same again. Mrs. Harper's eyes darted wildly, her hands trembling as she tried to cling to her falsehoods. "You don't understand," she stammered, voice cracking under the weight of her collapsing facade. "It wasn't what it looked like. There's more to the story, more I haven't told you." But her words sounded hollow, desperate attempts to cling to her dying lies. The man stepped closer, voice sharp and unwavering. "Enough. We have the evidence. The proof of your cruelty, your lies. There's no more hiding." With a swift motion, he pulled out a crumpled document from his coat pocket and held it high for everyone to see. It was a report, testimony from neighbors, official records, proof of neglect. The crowd gasped as the truth was laid bare, faces paling in shock. Mrs. Harper's face drained of color, her lips trembling as she tried to speak, but no words came. Her voice, once loud and commanding, was now a fragile whisper. "That's not true," she managed, voice trembling. "It's all a mistake. Someone's trying to ruin me." But the evidence spoke louder than any denial she could muster. People around them began whispering fiercely, turning their backs on her, rejecting her words. Murmurs of anger and betrayal filled the air. A woman stepped forward, voice firm. "You lied about everything. About Maria, about your cruelty. You've been hiding the truth for so long, and now everyone sees you for what you really are." Others nodded, some with tears streaming down their faces, their voices rising in condemnation. The crowd support shifted visibly, forming a circle of revulsion and justice around Mrs. Harper. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she tried to defend herself, but her words sounded weaker with each passing second. "You don't understand," she cried, voice trembling. "I had my reasons. I was trying to protect myself, my family," but her excuses dissolved in the collective roar of rejection. The man stepped forward again, voice loud and commanding. "You're finished. The truth is out. Justice will be served." His words echoed in the silent space that had fallen over the scene. Mrs. Harper's face paled further, her eyes darting around desperately. She tried to escape, to run, but the crowd moved instinctively, blocking her path. Someone grabbed her arm, firmly but not violently. "It's over," the man said again, voice cold with finality. "You can't deny it anymore." Her body trembled as her back was pressed against the wall, cornered and powerless. Her lips quivered, her once fiery arrogance replaced by a look of utter despair. The crowd's whispers turned into a chorus of disgust and relief. Maria, trembling but standing taller, looked at her with a fragile spark of hope. For the first time, she felt the weight of her pain lifting, replaced by a cautious glimmer of possibility. The man's voice lowered but remained steady. "This is the end of your reign of cruelty. The truth is out, and the people see you now. No more lies. No more hiding." Mrs. Harper's eyes flooded with tears, her breath hitching as she tried to muster a final, desperate plea. But her voice cracked, and she sank to her knees, defeated. The atmosphere was thick with a mixture of relief, anger, and lingering tension. The crowd stared in silence, watching her crumble. The power had shifted, justice was within reach. Yet, beneath it all, Maria waited, her heart pounding, knowing that this was only the beginning of her true journey. The fall of her tormentor marked a turning point, but the road to healing was still ahead. Maria's trembling legs gave way, and she sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Her body shook with relief and exhaustion, as if years of pain had poured out all at once. She barely registered the gentle hand that reached out to her, soft, warm, reassuring. It was the stranger, the man who had stepped in to shatter the lies and stand against the cruelty. He knelt beside her, wrapping her in his arms as if shielding her from the remnants of her suffering. His voice was gentle but firm, a soothing balm to her shattered heart. "You're safe now," he whispered. "No one will hurt you again. I promise." Maria clung to him, her small hands trembling as she buried her face against his chest. Her sobs broke free, raw and uncontrollable, as years of fear and loneliness spilled out. She whispered brokenly, "Don't leave me, please, don't leave me alone anymore." Her voice cracked with desperation, her small body trembling with the weight of her pain. The man held her tighter, softly rocking her, whispering comforting words. "I won't leave. I'm here. You're not alone anymore. We're going to get you through this. You're safe now, I swear." Around them, the crowd shifted. Some wiped away tears, others looked away, ashamed of the cruelty that had been exposed. But many stepped closer, offering quiet support, gentle touches, kind words, comforting glances. The atmosphere softened, no longer heavy with anger or judgment. It was filled with fragile hope. Maria's trembling slowly eased as she felt the warmth of genuine compassion. Her sobs became quieter, her breathing steadier. She looked up with tear-streaked eyes, searching the face of the stranger who had become her protector. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible. Her voice was fragile, yet filled with a deep, sincere gratitude. "Thank you for saving me. I thought I'd be alone forever." The man brushed her damp hair gently away from her face, his eyes soft with empathy. "You're not alone anymore. I promise. You're safe now, and I will make sure no one hurts you again." Her hands, still trembling, reached out and grasped his, holding on as if to anchor herself in this moment of fragile hope. "Please, don't let me go," she begged softly, eyes pleading. "I've been so scared for so long. I just want to be loved. I want to be safe." He squeezed her hands gently, never breaking eye contact. "You are loved," he said softly. "And you're safe now. We're going to help you heal. You don't have to carry all this pain alone anymore." Around them, the crowd support grew stronger. Faces filled with empathy and sorrow, some nodding, some quietly offering tissues or gentle pats on the shoulder. The air was no longer oppressive but filled with a quiet promise of compassion. Maria leaned into the stranger's embrace, her body finally relaxing, the tears gradually subsiding. Her small frame shuddered with relief, her heart slowly finding a new rhythm, one of hope instead of fear. She looked up again, her voice trembling but steadier. I want to try to be happy. I want to forget all the pain." Her words were tentative but sincere. The man nodded, his voice full of warmth. "You will. One step at a time. I'll be here every step of the way." A gentle silence settled over the scene, broken only by the soft sound of her breathing, now steadier. For the first time in a long, long time, Maria felt the faintest spark of hope flicker within her, an ember that refused to be extinguished. She was no longer alone. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a fragile sense of safety and trust began to grow. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of her healing. Maria sat quietly, nestled in the comforting embrace of the stranger who had become her protector. The sun was rising gently behind them, casting a warm glow over the scene. The darkness of the past seemed to lift with the light, revealing a new dawn, one filled with possibility and hope. Her eyes, still moist from tears, reflected a quiet gratitude. She whispered softly, "Thank you, for believing in me. For seeing me." Her voice was fragile but sincere, carrying the weight of her long-held pain finally beginning to fade. The stranger smiled gently, his voice full of reassurance. "You're strong. You just needed someone to see that. Now, you're not alone anymore. And you never will be." Around them, the crowd had dispersed, leaving space for healing. The shadows of cruelty and neglect had been replaced by quiet acts of kindness, words of comfort, promises of a better future. The air was filled with a gentle peace, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, hope could still find a way to shine. Maria looked up at him, her small face softly illuminated by the new light. "I used to think no one cared," she murmured. "That I'd always be forgotten. But now, I know that kindness can change everything." Her voice trembled but grew steadier. "It's what makes us human, to help each other, even when it's hard. Even when we're scared." The man nodded, his eyes shining with warmth. "That's right. Kindness is powerful. It can heal wounds no one sees. It can turn darkness into light." Slowly, she began to stand, supported by the gentle strength of her new protector. Her steps were tentative, but each one carried a quiet determination. She looked around at the faces that had once looked away in shame, and saw only compassion now. No one judged her. No one dismissed her pain. Instead, they saw her as a survivor, someone deserving of love and respect. As she took her first steps toward a new beginning, she whispered a simple truth: justice may take time, but it always comes. And kindness is what makes it worth waiting for. Her voice was filled with a gentle conviction that resonated beyond words. The world around her was changing, and she realized she was part of that change. No longer a victim of cruelty, she was becoming a symbol of hope, proof that even in the deepest darkness, compassion could ignite a brighter path. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and let it fill her with a quiet strength. She knew her journey wasn't over, but she also knew she was no longer alone. The kindness she had received was a spark, an eternal reminder that every act of compassion has the power to transform lives. And in that moment, Maria understood a universal truth: that love and kindness are the greatest forces in the world. That they can break through even the strongest walls of fear and pain. As she looked forward, her heart full of cautious hope, she whispered softly to herself, "The light will always find a way." And in that simple phrase, she carried the promise of a new beginning, one built on kindness, justice, and the unwavering belief that no one should ever suffer in silence.